In a moment that will surely be replayed across social media, Bruce Springsteen's appearance on The View turned volatile after a fiery back-and-forth with co-host Joy Behar. Tensions rose when Behar challenged Springsteen's credentials as a voice of the people, prompting a response from the boss that shook the live audience. What began as what seemed like a standard interview segment escalated quickly into a dramatic clash of principles and personalities. The show had been progressing along usual lines, with their hosts discussing current events, culture, and musical influence. When the topic turned toward authenticity in public figures, Behar pressed Springsteen, was he truly aligned with the struggles of everyday Americans, or simply speaking from a place of celebrity detachment? The question struck a nerve. Springsteen listened patiently as Behar elaborated, citing instances where political leaders or celebrities had fallen short of rhetoric. She implied that Springsteen, despite his rock and roll legacy, might be insulated from the harsher realities his music often portrays. The studio's mood shifted. You could sense watchers leaning in. Without warning, Springsteen launched into a pointed rebuttal. He spoke with intensity, his voice firm, protesting that his work had always been grounded in roots, labor, struggle, and truth. He reminded them and the viewers of his history, the blue-collar stories, the anthems for working people, the years he spent digging into social issues and song. Behar, momentarily taken aback, attempted to interrupt, to reframe the accusation, but Springsteen would not be sidetracked. He pressed forward, leaning into the microphone, declaring that criticism from someone sitting comfortably behind a desk trivialized what it meant to walk the walk. In that exchange, Behar pushed back, asserting that even those with sincere intent must still answer to accountability. She insisted that public figures be scrutinized, no matter their past. Yet her tone grew sharper, increasingly adversarial. The give-and-take was no longer cordial. Springsteen paused, then responded with the rhetorical question, was he to be judged by those who had never faced the trenches? He recounted scenes from his life on the road, from towns forgotten by policy, from people struggling, people he'd tried to lift up in music. He insisted his empathy was not symbolic, it was lived. As the studio lights glared, Behar's face hardened. She challenged him on whether his concerts, his tours, and his public positions matched his purported values. She questioned whether, in recent years, his political alignments had kept pace with those he claimed to defend. The intensity built. Springsteen, voice rising, denied hypocrisy. He rejected the notion that experience could be divorced from result. He reminded Behar that one cannot simply issue statements, one must act, persist, stay involved, and that he had done so for decades. Several times during the exchange, the other co-hosts attempted to intervene, bridging the gap, steering the show back to calm waters. But Springsteen would not be mollified. The confrontation had become larger than one guest and one co-host. It was about legacy, consistency, and the weight of public words. The live audience held its breath. Some shifted in their seats, others sat rigid, watching an icon defend his territory. The usual banter, laughter, and transitions of daytime television vanished, replaced by the raw edge of a man unwilling to be dismissed. Behar, reining in her tone, sought to cool things down, offering that the critique was not personal but representational. Still, Springsteen cut in sharply that representation meant bearing the scorn, the second guesses, and the burden of proving one's sincerity over time. The two stood off. Verbal jousts traded rapidly. She cited his public statements, he cited a lifetime's work. She demanded clarity, he insisted on nuance. They circled each other verbally, each trying to draw the other into a concession. At length, Springsteen offered a closing salvo. If one would question his authenticity, he welcomed the challenge, but not the dismissal. He urged viewers to look at his catalog, his actions, his decades of engagement, rather than reduce him to a talking point. The segment ended without a neat resolution. The hosts moved on to a commercial break, but the air remained charged. Later, social media erupted. Fans defended Springsteen's integrity, critics dissected Behar's line of questioning, and the controversy became a flashpoint in debates over celebrity, accountability, and voice. When the cameras cut back from the commercial break, the tension still lingered palpably in the air. Bruce Springsteen, visibly frustrated but composed, adjusted his microphone while Joy Behar attempted a lighter tone to smooth things over. However, her smile was strained, and the audience could feel that the argument had left a mark. The co-hosts tried steering the discussion back to music and upcoming projects, but the undercurrent of disagreement refused to fade away, setting the stage for yet another round of verbal sparring that nobody had expected on a daytime talk show. Springsteen took a deep breath before continuing. He said that the role of an artist was not to please everyone but to challenge, to provoke thought, and to bring light to the unseen corners of society. He insisted that his songs were never political postures but reflections of lived experience. Behar raised an eyebrow and asked if he thought criticism meant censorship. Springsteen replied that criticism was fine but questioning one's integrity without understanding their journey was unfair. The audience responded with applause, clearly resonating with his words. Joy Behar, never one to back down, leaned forward and asked if Springsteen felt the same empathy for those who disagreed with his views. Her question hinted at polarization in today's cultural landscape. Bruce nodded slowly, saying that empathy wasn't selective, that real compassion included listening to those on the other side. Yet he added that listening didn't mean agreeing, and that silence in the face of injustice was not neutrality but complicity. The room fell silent, absorbing the weight of that statement. Co-host Whoopi Goldberg intervened, attempting to lighten the atmosphere by joking that they could all use a bit of Born to Chill energy. The audience laughed, and even Springsteen cracked a small grin. But the respite was brief. Joy, emboldened, returned to the heart of her critique, asking whether fame had insulated him from the everyday realities she once sang about. Her tone was probing but sharp, reigniting the spark of confrontation that had only barely cooled. Bruce leaned back, crossing his arms, and calmly explained that success didn't erase his roots. He spoke about Freehold, New Jersey, and the factories, the working-class families, and the small-town struggles that shaped him. He said those memories were permanent, etched into every lyric he ever wrote. He emphasized that fame had never made him forget where he came from, and that his empathy wasn't something he could switch off. For a moment, the sincerity in his voice seemed to disarm even Behar. Still, Behar wasn't done. She countered that while his songs told stories of resilience and hardship, his current political endorsements sometimes alienated the very working-class groups he once represented. Springsteen frowned, clearly irritated, and asked if she believed empathy could only exist inside a voting booth. He reminded her that compassion was not a party line but a human responsibility, and that his art was his form of activism. The tension rose again. Bruce's words hit hard, and Behar looked momentarily defensive. She clarified that she respected his artistry but worried that celebrities often blurred the line between influence and manipulation. That struck a chord. Springsteen's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked whether journalists and talk show hosts were immune to the same influence. The audience erupted into gasps and laughter at his pointed comeback, and the camera caught Behar smirking, clearly aware she'd met her match. For a brief second, both paused, seemingly acknowledging that the discussion had crossed from professional critique into philosophical territory. The boss softened his tone, saying that he valued open dialogue but disliked when public platforms twisted words into outrage. He noted that shows like The View could use their space to heal divides rather than deepen them. The co-hosts nodded subtly, perhaps recognizing the truth in his observation. Behar, perhaps realizing the exchange was growing too heated, shifted gears. She asked Springsteen about the emotional process behind his songwriting. He smiled faintly, explaining that every song was like a photograph, a snapshot of emotion frozen in time. He described how writing helped him process both personal and social pain, and that performing those songs allowed him to reconnect with people from every walk of life. The conversation began to ease, if only slightly. As he spoke, the crowd seemed to lean in closer, captivated by his passion. Even those who had been uneasy moments earlier found themselves drawn back into his world. Bruce talked about music as a bridge across broken ground, saying that the most powerful thing an artist could do was remind people of their shared humanity. The tension slowly transformed into admiration. The audience responded with heartfelt applause, signaling their support. Behar, to her credit, acknowledged his sincerity and admitted that she admired his courage in standing by his convictions. But she reiterated that part of her job was to challenge public figures, even beloved ones, to account for their influence. Springsteen nodded, saying he respected that, but urged her to distinguish between challenge and attack. That one led to conversation, while the other led to division. His tone was calm now, but still fiery with conviction. By this point, even the production crew seemed aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Cameras zoomed in on Springsteen's face, capturing the glint of intensity in his eyes. He spoke about America as a constant work in progress, imperfect but worth fighting for. He said that artists, journalists, and citizens alike share the responsibility to keep truth alive, not as ideology but as humanity's core pursuit. That discussion had evolved beyond a spat. It had become a masterclass in passion, principle, and the price of authenticity. Behar softened visibly, saying that despite their clash, she admired his unwavering honesty. Bruce smiled and said disagreement wasn't the enemy, apathy was. The audience erupted once again, cheering the reconciliation between two strong personalities who had finally found common ground through confrontation. As the segment drew to its final minutes, Springsteen thanked the hosts for the conversation, saying that the best dialogues are the ones that make people uncomfortable but also make them think. Behar extended her hand, and Bruce shook it firmly, both exchanging faint smiles that suggested mutual respect. The camera caught Whoopi's relieved expression as she joked that they had survived The Boss vs. The View unscathed. Mostly. The show went off the air with applause still ringing in the studio. Social media quickly exploded with clips, debates, and reactions. Some viewers sided with Behar's tough questioning. Others praised Springsteen for defending his integrity. Yet, in the end, what resonated most was the authenticity of the moment. Two voices clashing not out of hatred, but from a shared desire to speak truth. It was television at its rawest, messy, human, unforgettable. In the hours following the explosive episode, clips of the exchange flooded social media platforms. Fans of Bruce Springsteen flooded comment sections praising his composure, while others applauded Joy Behar for standing her ground. The clip became one of the most talked about moments in The View's recent history. Television critics called it a rare, unscripted collision of ideals, while tabloids framed it as a feud. Yet behind the headlines, both parties had revealed something deeply human at the collision of conviction and perception in front of millions. That evening, Springsteen's team released a brief statement emphasizing that the exchange on The View was passionate but respectful, affirming that Bruce valued open dialogue even when it turned difficult. The statement also mentioned that he appreciated the opportunity to express what authenticity meant in his art. Meanwhile, Behar made her own comment during a follow-up broadcast, acknowledging that she respected Bruce but wouldn't apologize for asking tough questions. Their responses seemed to signal closure, but public fascination only grew stronger. Analysts on various networks began dissecting the moment frame by frame, with some arguing that Behar's questions reflected a broader frustration with celebrity activism, while others claimed Springsteen embodied the kind of unfiltered sincerity that television rarely sees anymore. The debate stretched beyond entertainment circles into political talk shows and podcasts, each dissecting what it meant for artists to remain politically and socially engaged in modern America. Springsteen, known for avoiding media drama, found himself unexpectedly at the center of it. Friends close to him described him as calm, even amused, by the uproar. He reportedly told one associate that if a spirited debate could spark reflection, then it was a good day for conversation. Those who knew him best said that behind his fiery response on air was not anger but a fierce belief that his work had always spoken for those without microphones. Over the next few days, The View producers saw ratings spike as clips of the confrontation circulated online. The network capitalized by uploading extended footage, including behind-the-scenes moments that showed Behar and Springsteen exchanging polite words once cameras stopped rolling. Viewers were surprised to see that despite the heated discussion, both maintained respect. It became a reminder that discourse could be sharp without becoming hateful, a lesson often forgotten in modern media. Fans across generations chimed in. Older fans remembered the Springsteen who sang about broken towns and second chances, while younger viewers discovered a man who still carried his convictions with grit and grace. Hashtags like #TheBossSpeaks and #ViewShowdown trended for 2 days straight. Memes, analyses, and even fan art appeared online, turning what was originally a tense moment into a cultural talking point. Joy Behar herself faced a split reaction. Some praised her for challenging a revered figure instead of offering blind adoration. Others accused her of disrespect, arguing that her tone crossed into personal attack. True to form, Behar remained unapologetic, saying that her role was to represent the audience's questions, not to flatter guests. "If the boss can't take a tough question," she quipped, "he's not the boss." The remark reignited online debates. Meanwhile, Bruce used the spotlight to reaffirm his message. During a concert later that week, he addressed the controversy indirectly, saying, "Sometimes truth comes with sparks. What matters is that we keep talking." The crowd erupted in cheers. Without mentioning Behar or the show, he sang The Rising with an extra edge, his performance carrying the raw energy of someone who had something more to say than what fit in a talk show segment. Journalists covering the incident began noting how it symbolized the wide tension between entertainers and media hosts, one side protecting artistic expression, the other demanding accountability. Commentators described it as a snapshot of America's ongoing cultural divide, played out under bright studio lights. And in the middle of it all stood Bruce Springsteen, unwilling to compromise his principles yet graceful enough to keep the conversation alive. As the week wore on, the uproar began to soften into reflection. Think pieces emerged exploring how celebrity interviews had evolved into battlegrounds for ideology rather than spaces for connection. Springsteen's comments about empathy and authenticity were replayed in classrooms and discussion panels. Teachers and analysts pointed out how his words bridged the gap between art and activism, and how Behar's persistence underscored journalism's duty to challenge power, even when it's artistic power. In subsequent interviews, Springsteen maintained his composure. He told one reporter that he didn't regret the confrontation. "It wasn't about winning or losing," he said. "It was about honesty. If people argue, that means they're still paying attention." His humility and directness disarmed critics who expected defensiveness. Instead, the incident strengthened his reputation as a man who lives by the words he sings. Joy Behar, too, reflected on the moment during a later episode of The View. She admitted that though the exchange was tense, she admired Springsteen's passion and conceded that such moments were rare on television. "We argue because we care," she said, adding that strong voices shouldn't shy away from strong questions. The audience applauded, and even some of Bruce's fans praised her acknowledgement of mutual respect. Eventually, what had begun as a clash transformed into a symbolic dialogue between two generations, one that valued confrontation as honesty and another that sought connection through empathy. It reminded audiences that disagreement didn't mean division. Both Springsteen and Behar, in their own ways, represented the spirit of debate that keeps public discourse alive. By the month's end, the dust had settled. Ratings for The View remained high, and Springsteen's latest album saw a noticeable bump in streaming numbers. Commentators joked that controversy had once again proven to be free publicity, but fans saw it differently. To them, it was proof that Bruce still had fire in his soul, and the same raw conviction that made him the boss decades ago. In the end, the story wasn't about an explosion but an awakening, a reminder that truth, when spoken aloud, can sound like anger but really comes from passion. Bruce Springsteen walked off that stage not defeated but reaffirmed, and Joy Behar, for all her criticism, walked away respected for her fearlessness. Together, they gave audiences something rare in modern television, a moment that was real, unfiltered, and utterly unforgettable.